If you're watching Obsidian Files right now, help me prove something wrong. My mother said I wouldn't even reach 1,000 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show her that these tales matter. General Marcus Washington had flown on Air Force One. He'd piloted F-16 fighter jets over hostile territory. He'd coordinated military operations from situation rooms in the Pentagon. He'd stood on aircraft carriers in the South China Sea and commanded 50,000 troops across 3 continents. But today, at 58 years old, after 40 years of service to the United States Air Force, General Marcus Washington, 4-star general, recipient of the Distinguished Service Medal, the Silver Star, and the Defense Superior Service Medal, was flying commercial. He was retired now. As of 3 weeks ago, he'd handed over command of U.S. Air Force's Central Command and officially ended his military career. The retirement ceremony had been grand. Speeches from senators, a flyover by the Thunderbirds, a personal letter from the president thanking him for his extraordinary service and unwavering dedication to our nation. But the ceremony was over. The uniform was packed away, and Marcus was just a civilian now, heading home to Atlanta to see his grandchildren. He stood in the security line at Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport, wearing jeans, a gray hoodie, and a worn baseball cap from his alma mater, the Air Force Academy. In his carry-on bag, he had a change of clothes, some books, and a small box containing his final set of military challenge coins, gifts he planned to give to his grandsons. The TSA pre-check line was moving slowly. Marcus didn't mind. He had nowhere to be. His daughter wasn't picking him up until 3 p.m., and his flight didn't leave until 11:30 a.m. He had time. He pulled out his boarding pass and ID, a standard Georgia driver's license with his civilian address. He'd let his military ID expire. He didn't need it anymore. As he waited, he noticed the TSA agent at the front of the line. The man was in his late 30s, with a thick neck, a buzz cut, and the kind of aggressive posture that suggested he took his job very seriously. His name tag read K. Morrison. Kevin Morrison had been a TSA agent for 12 years. He'd applied to be a police officer 3 times and been rejected each time for failing the psychological evaluation. So he'd settled for TSA, a job that gave him a uniform, a badge, and a small amount of authority over people. Kevin loved the authority. He loved telling people to take off their shoes, to empty their pockets, to step aside for additional screening. He especially loved the power he had to detain people, to pull them out of line, to make them miss their flights. And over the years, Kevin had developed a habit, a pattern, really, of targeting certain people for random additional screening. People who looked, in his mind, suspicious. People who didn't fit his mental image of what a traveler should look like. People like Marcus Washington. Marcus stepped forward when it was his turn, handing over his boarding pass and ID to Kevin. Kevin glanced at the ID, then looked up at Marcus. His eyes lingered on Marcus's hoodie, his worn sneakers, his casual appearance. "Going to Atlanta?" Kevin asked, his tone already skeptical. "Yes, sir," Marcus replied politely. "What's the purpose of your trip? Visiting family?" Kevin looked back at the ID, then at Marcus again. "You live in Atlanta?" "Yes, sir." "But you're flying from D.C.? "I've been working in D.C. for the past few years, just relocated back home." Kevin's eyes narrowed. Something about this didn't sit right with him. A black man in his 50s, dressed casually, flying one way from D.C. to Atlanta. No suit, no briefcase, just a small carry-on. "Step aside, sir," Kevin said, his voice hardening. "You've been selected for additional screening." Marcus blinked. "Additional screening? I have TSA pre-check." "Doesn't matter. Random selection. Step aside." Marcus took a breath, keeping his voice calm. "Sir, I've flown hundreds of times. I've never been randomly selected before. Can you tell me what triggered this?" Kevin's face reddened. "I don't have to explain anything to you. Step aside. Now." Marcus glanced at the line behind him. Other travelers staring, some recording on their phones. He didn't want to make a scene. He'd spent 40 years in the military learning discipline, learning when to push back and when to comply. This wasn't worth a fight. "Okay," Marcus said, stepping out of line. "Where do you want me to go?" "Follow me," Kevin said, grabbing Marcus's carry-on bag without asking. Kevin led Marcus to a secondary screening area, a roped-off section with a metal table, a full-body scanner, and 2 other TSA agents standing by. One of them, a younger woman named Lisa Chen, looked up as they approached. "Kevin, what's this?" Lisa asked. "Random screening," Kevin said, dropping Marcus's bag on the table with more force than necessary. "Guy's acting suspicious." Lisa frowned. "He doesn't look suspicious to me." "I didn't ask for your opinion," Kevin snapped. "Just run his bag through again." Marcus stood quietly, his hands at his sides, watching as Kevin unzipped his carry-on and began pulling out the contents. Books, clothes, a toiletry bag, and then the small wooden box containing his challenge coins. Kevin opened the box, looking at the coins inside. They were military challenge coins, each one representing a different unit Marcus had commanded, a different operation he'd led, a different milestone in his career. There were coins from the Pentagon, from Air Force Central Command, from his time in Afghanistan and Iraq. "What are these?" Kevin asked, holding one up. "Military challenge coins," Marcus said. "I'm retired Air Force." Kevin snorted. "Sure you are." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Excuse me?" "These look fake," Kevin said, tossing the box back onto the table. "You probably bought them online." Lisa stepped forward. "Kevin, those look real to me. My dad has a collection." "I said I didn't ask for your opinion," Kevin interrupted. He turned back to Marcus. "You got any proof you were in the military?" "My military ID expired last month," Marcus said, keeping his voice even. "But I can show you my DD-214. I have a digital copy on my phone." "I don't need to see your phone," Kevin said dismissively. "I need to see government-issued ID, and this," he held up Marcus's driver's license, "doesn't say anything about the military." Marcus took a deep breath. "Sir, I'm just trying to get home to see my grandchildren. I'm not carrying anything illegal. I'm not a threat. Can we please just move this along?" "Are you rushing me?" Kevin's voice rose. "Because it sounds like you're trying to rush me. That makes me think you're hiding something." "I'm not hiding anything." "Then you won't mind if I do a full pat-down." Kevin turned to Lisa. "Get a supervisor. I think we need to do a thorough search." Lisa hesitated. "Kevin, this seems excessive." "Now, Chen." Lisa walked away, shaking her head. Marcus stood there, surrounded by curious onlookers, feeling the weight of their stares. He'd faced enemy fire. He'd commanded thousands of troops. He'd briefed presidents. But right now, in this airport, he was just another black man being treated like a criminal. Kevin made Marcus stand with his arms outstretched while he conducted the pat-down. His hands were rough, invasive, clearly designed to humiliate rather than to actually search for contraband. "You're being very thorough," Marcus said quietly. "I take my job seriously," Kevin replied. "Unlike some people." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I've seen guys like you before, coming back from DC dressed down, trying to blend in. You're probably running something. Drugs, maybe. Or worse." Marcus's hands clenched into fists, but he kept them at his sides. "I'm a retired military officer. I've spent 40 years serving this country. I've been to war zones you can't even pronounce. I've sacrificed time with my family, my health, my peace of mind, all for this country. And you're accusing me of being a drug dealer?" Kevin stepped back, his face flushed. "Don't give me that military hero speech. Anyone can claim they were in the military. I need proof." "I offered you proof. You refused to look at it." "Because it's probably fake." A supervisor finally arrived, a middle-aged man named Ron Patterson who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "What's going on here, Morrison?" "This guy is being uncooperative," Kevin said. I think he's carrying contraband. I want to search his bag more thoroughly, maybe even detain him. Ron looked at Marcus, then at the challenge coins on the table, then back at Kevin. Kevin, those are military coins. I can see them from here. They could be fake. They're not fake, Ron said, exasperated. Look, Mr. He glanced at Marcus's ID. Mr. Washington, I apologize for the inconvenience. You're free to go. No, he's not, Kevin interrupted. I'm not done with the screening. Kevin, you are done. This is excessive. Let the man catch his flight. Kevin's face turned red. He's suspicious. Look at him. Hoodie, no suit, one-way ticket. Half the people in this airport are wearing hoodies, Ron said. And one-way tickets aren't illegal. You're profiling him, Kevin. Stand down. Stand. I'm doing my job. You're harassing a passenger. Let him go. Kevin stared at Ron, then at Marcus, his jaw working. Finally, he stepped back. Fine. But this is going in my report. You do that, Ron said. He turned to Marcus. Sir, again, I apologize. You're free to proceed to your gate. Marcus grabbed his bag, his hands shaking slightly with suppressed anger. Thank you. He walked away, heading toward his gate, trying to shake off the humiliation, the rage, the sense of being reduced to a stereotype. But as he walked, he heard Kevin behind him, speaking loudly to another agent. Guys like that are always trouble. Trust me, I've been doing this long enough to know. Marcus stopped. He turned around, walking back to the screening area. Ron looked up, surprised. Mr. Washington? Marcus looked directly at Kevin. What's your full name, Agent Morrison? Kevin smirked. Kevin Morrison. Why? You gonna complain? Yes, Marcus said simply. I am. Good luck with that, Kevin said. Complaints go nowhere. I've had dozens. I'm still here. Marcus nodded slowly. We'll see about that. He turned and walked to his gate, pulling out his phone as he went. He scrolled through his contacts until he found the one he was looking for. General Linda Hayes, current Vice Chief of Staff of the Air Force. He dialed. Marcus? Linda answered warmly. How's retirement treating you? Not great, Linda. I need a favor. Marcus's flight landed in Atlanta at 2:15 p.m. His daughter, Stephanie, was waiting for him at baggage claim with his two grandsons, ages 8 and 10. They ran up to him, shouting, Grandpa! And wrapping their arms around his waist. For a moment, Marcus forgot about the airport. He forgot about Kevin Morrison. He just hugged his grandsons and felt grateful to be home. Stephanie drove him to her house in the suburbs, chatting about school, soccer practice, and her husband's new job. Marcus listened, smiling, but his mind kept drifting back to the screening. That evening, after the boys were in bed, Stephanie poured him a glass of whiskey and sat down beside him on the couch. Dad, you okay? You've been quiet all evening. Marcus sighed, swirling the whiskey in his glass. I had an incident at the airport this morning. What kind of incident? He told her everything. The random screening, Kevin Morrison's accusations, the pat-down, the humiliation. Stephanie's face darkened with anger. He accused you of being a drug dealer? You, a 4-star general? He didn't believe I was in the military. Did you tell him? I tried. He said my challenge coins were fake. Stephanie stood up, pacing. Dad, you need to file a complaint. This is racial profiling. It's discrimination. I already made a call, Marcus said quietly. To who? Linda Hayes, Vice Chief of Staff of the Air Force. Stephanie's eyes widened. What did she say? She said she'd look into it. What Marcus didn't tell his daughter was the full extent of the conversation he'd had with General Hayes. Marcus, this is unacceptable, Linda had said, her voice tight with anger. You served this country for 40 years. You commanded AFCENT. You briefed the Joint Chiefs. And some TSA agent treated you like a criminal? It happens, Linda. I'm not the first and I won't be the last. But it shouldn't happen at all, especially not at Reagan National. That airport has a military terminal. They should know better. Marcus had paused. There's something else. The agent, Kevin Morrison. He said he's had dozens of complaints and nothing's happened. That tells me this isn't an isolated incident. This is a pattern. Then we need to break the pattern, Linda had said. Marcus, I'm going to make some calls. This is going to get escalated. Are you okay with that? More than okay. If this guy is profiling people, he needs to be stopped. Consider it done. Within 24 hours, several things happened. First, General Linda Hayes contacted the TSA Administrator, a presidentially appointed position overseeing all airport security in the United States. Second, the TSA Administrator contacted the Federal Security Director for Reagan National Airport and ordered a full review of Kevin Morrison's employment record. Third, the Department of Defense Office of Inspector General opened an investigation into potential discrimination against military personnel at Reagan National. Fourth, the FBI's Civil Rights Division was notified of a potential pattern of racial profiling. And fifth, a team of federal investigators descended on Reagan National Airport with a very specific mission: find out what Kevin Morrison had been doing for the past 12 years. Ron Patterson, the TSA supervisor, was the first to be interviewed. He sat in a small office in the airport's administrative wing, across from two investigators, one from the TSA's Office of Inspection, the other from the FBI. Mr. Patterson, how long have you worked with Kevin Morrison? About 8 years. And in that time, how many complaints have been filed against him? Ron shifted uncomfortably. I'd have to check the exact number. We already know the number, the FBI agent said. 47 complaints in 12 years. 32 of those involved allegations of racial profiling. What we want to know is why he's still employed. Ron looked down at his hands. Look, I've tried to discipline him. I've written him up multiple times, but he's got seniority. He's got union protection. And honestly, management doesn't care unless there's a lawsuit. There's about to be a lawsuit, the TSA investigator said. Multiple lawsuits. Because the man Kevin Morrison harassed yesterday? That was retired General Marcus Washington, 4-star general, 40 years of service. And we have video of the entire encounter. Ron's face went pale. A general? Yes. And he's not the only military member Morrison has targeted. We pulled the records. Over the past 5 years, Morrison has flagged for random additional screening, an unusual number of black men traveling on military orders, service members in uniform, veterans with VA medical appointments, even active duty officers. I didn't know. You should have known, the FBI agent interrupted. You're his supervisor. You signed off on his performance reviews. You approved his continued employment despite dozens of complaints. That makes you complicit. Ron swallowed hard. What happens now? Now we interview everyone Morrison has worked with. We pull every complaint. We review every screening he's conducted. And if we find a pattern of civil rights violations, which we already have, charges will be filed. Charges? Against who? Against Morrison, and possibly against you and other supervisors who enabled his behavior. Lisa Chen was interviewed next. She was nervous but honest. Kevin has always been aggressive, she said, especially with black passengers. I've seen him pull people out of line for no reason. He targets people who look suspicious, but his definition of suspicious is just racist. Did you ever report this? The investigator asked. Twice. Nothing happened. I was told it was his judgment call. Do you remember the incident with General Washington yesterday? Yes. Kevin was completely out of line. General Washington was polite, calm, cooperative. But Kevin kept pushing. He wanted to humiliate him. Why didn't you intervene? Lisa looked down. Because Kevin outranks me, and I didn't want to lose my job. You might lose it anyway, the FBI agent said. Everyone who witnessed his behavior and didn't report it properly is under review. The investigators pulled Kevin Morrison's personnel file. It was damning. 47 complaints, 32 alleging racial profiling, 15 alleging excessive force or harassment, 2 alleging sexual harassment. And yet Kevin had received satisfactory performance reviews every year. He'd been promoted twice. He'd even received a commendation for vigilance after he detained a passenger who turned out to be completely innocent but fit Kevin's profile of suspicious. The pattern was clear. Kevin Morrison had been targeting Black passengers, Latino passengers, and Muslim passengers for over a decade. And the TSA had done nothing to stop him. On Wednesday morning, 3 days after Marcus's incident, Kevin Morrison was called into an office at Reagan National. He walked in expecting a routine meeting. Instead, he found 2 FBI agents, 1 TSA investigator, and his union representative. "Mr. Morrison, please sit down," the TSA investigator said. Kevin sat, his eyes darting between the agents. "What's this about?" "This is about your employment with the TSA and multiple violations of civil rights laws," the FBI agent said. "We've been investigating your conduct over the past 12 years, and we found a clear pattern of racial profiling, harassment, and abuse of authority." Kevin's face went red. "That's ridiculous. I do my job. I follow protocol." "Protocol doesn't include targeting Black passengers at 3 times the rate of white passengers," the investigator said. "Protocol doesn't include conducting invasive searches without probable cause. Protocol doesn't include telling a 4-star general that his military service is fake." Kevin's mouth opened and closed. A what?" "General Marcus Washington. The man you harassed on Monday. 4-star general, retired, 40 years of service, recipient of the Distinguished Service Medal and the Silver Star. The man whose challenge coins you called fake." Kevin's face went from red to white. I didn't know." "You didn't ask," the FBI agent said. "You saw a Black man in a hoodie and assumed he was a criminal. You've been doing that for 12 years, and it ends today." "You're firing me?" Kevin's voice cracked. "You're being placed on immediate administrative leave pending criminal charges," the investigator said. "The Department of Justice is reviewing your case for potential civil rights violations under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. You could face federal charges, fines, and prison time." "Prison?" Kevin stood up. "This is insane. I was doing my job." "Sit down, Mr. Morrison," his union rep said quietly. "No. This is because of that guy, isn't it? He complained, and now you're trying to make an example out of me." "He's not the only one who complained," the FBI agent said. "We've identified 32 other passengers you targeted over the past 5 years. 12 of them were military members, 4 were federal employees. All of them have agreed to testify." Kevin sank back into his chair, his hands shaking. "You have the right to remain silent," the FBI agent began. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." The story broke on Thursday. A reporter from the Washington Post had been tipped off by a source inside the TSA. The headline read, "TSA Agent at Reagan National arrested for civil rights violations after targeting retired 4-star general." The article detailed Marcus's experience, Kevin Morrison's history of complaints, and the federal investigation. It included quotes from other passengers who'd been targeted by Kevin, including an active-duty Army captain who'd been detained for 2 hours and missed his flight to his father's funeral. The story went viral within hours. By Friday morning, every major news outlet had picked it up. CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, NPR, all of them were running stories about the TSA agent who profiled a 4-star general. Marcus's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters wanted interviews. Civil rights organizations wanted him to speak at events. Veterans groups wanted him to lead a campaign for reform. But Marcus didn't want any of it. He was sitting on his daughter's back porch, watching his grandsons play in the yard, when his phone rang again. This time, it was General Linda Hayes. "Marcus, Have you seen the news? Hard to avoid it. The TSA administrator just resigned. The Secretary of Homeland Security is launching a full review of TSA screening procedures, and there are 3 separate lawsuits being filed against Morrison and the TSA. Marcus sighed. Linda, I didn't want this to become a circus. I just wanted to get home. I know, but this is bigger than one bad TSA agent. This is about a broken system, and you're the person who can help fix it. I'm retired, Linda. I'm done with briefings and policy meetings. Then don't do briefings. Do something better. Tell your story. Let people see what happened, because right now you're a symbol. You're a 4-star general who was treated like a criminal in his own country. That matters. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, watching his grandsons chase each other around the yard. What do you want me to do? There's a press conference on Monday at the Pentagon. The Secretary of Defense wants to announce new protections for military members traveling through airports. He wants you there. Why me? Because you're the reason this is happening. Because your story forced people to pay attention. And because if you stand up there in your uniform and tell people what happened, it will mean something. Marcus thought about it. He thought about the humiliation he'd felt. He thought about all the other people without his rank, without his resources, without his platform, who'd been treated the same way or worse. Okay, he said finally. I'll do it. Monday morning, the Pentagon briefing room was packed. Reporters, photographers, camera crews, everyone was there. At the podium stood the Secretary of Defense, a former Navy admiral named James Kellerman. Beside him, in full Air Force dress uniform, was General Marcus Washington. It was the first time Marcus had worn his uniform since his retirement ceremony. The 4 stars on his shoulders gleamed under the lights. His chest was covered in ribbons and medals, each one representing a moment of sacrifice, a deployment, a mission completed. He looked like what he was, a warrior. Secretary Kellerman spoke first. Good morning. Last week, retired General Marcus Washington was subjected to racial profiling and harassment by a TSA agent at Reagan National Airport. This incident is unacceptable. It is a betrayal of the values we hold as a nation and a disgrace to the uniform General Washington wore for 40 years. The room was silent except for the sound of cameras clicking. As a result of this incident, we are implementing immediate reforms. First, all TSA agents will undergo mandatory training on recognizing and respecting military identification and service. Second, military members traveling on orders will have access to expedited screening. Third, we are establishing a direct hotline for service members to report discrimination or harassment. Kellerman paused, looking at Marcus. But these reforms are only the beginning. The real change needs to come from leadership, from accountability, and from a commitment to treating every American with dignity and respect. General Washington has agreed to share his experience today. General? Marcus stepped to the microphone. He looked out at the sea of faces, reporters, officials, veterans in the audience. He took a breath. My name is General Marcus Washington. I served in the United States Air Force for 40 years. I've flown combat missions over Iraq and Afghanistan. I've commanded units in Korea, Germany, and the Middle East. I've briefed presidents. I've led thousands of men and women in uniform. And I've done it all because I believe in this country. His voice was steady, but there was an edge to it, a quiet anger. Last Monday, I was flying home to Atlanta to see my grandchildren. I was in civilian clothes because I'm retired now. I don't wear the uniform anymore. And as I went through security at Reagan National, I was pulled out of line by a TSA agent named Kevin Morrison. Marcus paused, letting that name hang in the air. Agent Morrison saw a black man in a hoodie and decided I was suspicious. He didn't ask me why I was traveling. He didn't look at my boarding pass or my ID closely. He saw my skin color, and he made a judgment. The room was completely silent now. He searched my bag. He found my military challenge coins, coins I earned through decades of service, and he told me they were fake. He said I probably bought them online. He accused me of being a drug dealer. Marcus's jaw tightened. I tried to show him proof of my service. He refused. I asked why I was being screened. He said I was acting suspicious. And then he conducted a pat-down that was designed not to find contraband, but to humiliate me. A reporter in the front row was wiping her eyes. I stood there, in front of dozens of people, being treated like a criminal. And I thought about all the times I'd been in situations like this before. Growing up in the South, getting pulled over for driving while black, being followed in stores, being told I didn't belong.
Marcus's voice grew stronger. But this time was different. Because this time, I wasn't just Marcus Washington, a black man in America. I was General Marcus Washington. And I had the power to do something about it. He looked directly into the cameras. I didn't ask for this platform. I didn't want to be the face of this issue. But here I am. And I'm going to use this moment to say something that needs to be said. He paused. If this can happen to me, a 4-star general, a man with 40 years of service, a man with resources and connections, imagine what happens to people who don't have those advantages. Imagine the young black soldier traveling home on leave. Imagine the Latino veteran going to a VA appointment. Imagine the Muslim family trying to board a plane. Marcus's voice dropped, but it carried through the room like a command. This isn't just about one TSA agent. This is about a system that allows people like Kevin Morrison to abuse their authority for years without consequences. This is about a culture that profiles people based on the color of their skin. And this is about whether we, as a nation, are going to tolerate it. He straightened, his shoulders back, his chin up, the posture of a man who'd led troops into battle. I've spent 40 years defending this country. I've risked my life for it. I've sacrificed time with my family for it. And I will not stand quietly while people are treated as less than human because of how they look. The room erupted in applause. Reporters stood up. Veterans in the audience saluted. Marcus stepped back from the microphone, his hands shaking slightly, but his face calm. He'd said what needed to be said. Kevin Morrison was fired from the TSA within a week. The federal charges took longer. The Department of Justice charged him with deprivation of rights under color of law, a federal crime that carried a maximum sentence of 1 year in prison. But Kevin also faced civil lawsuits from 32 passengers he'd targeted over the years. One by one, they came forward with their stories. There was Captain James Rivera, an Army officer who'd been detained for 3 hours because Kevin insisted his military orders were fake. There was Fatima al-Rashid, a Muslim woman traveling with her children, who Kevin had subjected to an invasive search that left her in tears. There was Dr. Jerome Thompson, a black physician, who Kevin had accused of carrying drugs despite having zero evidence. Each of them had complained. Each complaint had been ignored. But now, with Marcus Washington's story shining a spotlight on the issue, their voices were finally being heard. Kevin's trial was set for 6 months later. In the meantime, he was banned from working in any federal security position. His union tried to fight for him, but the evidence was overwhelming. Ron Patterson, Kevin's supervisor, was also fired. An internal investigation found that he'd ignored complaints, falsified performance reviews, and created a culture that enabled Kevin's behavior. 3 other TSA supervisors at Reagan National were placed on administrative leave, and the TSA itself underwent a massive overhaul of its screening procedures, adding bias training, oversight mechanisms, and accountability measures.
Marcus returned to Atlanta and tried to resume his quiet retirement, but the story wouldn't let him go. He received thousands of emails from veterans, from people of color, from anyone who'd ever felt powerless in the face of authority. They thanked him for speaking up. They shared their own stories. They asked him to keep fighting. And slowly, Marcus realized that his fight wasn't over. He started speaking at events, veteran organizations, civil rights groups, universities. He talked about his experience, but he also talked about systemic change, about accountability, about the need for people in power to use that power responsibly. He testified before Congress about TSA reform. He met with the new TSA administrator to discuss policy changes. He even wrote an op-ed for the New York Times titled, "I served this country for 40 years, then I was treated like a criminal." The op-ed went viral, sparking a national conversation about racial profiling, military respect, and the balance between security and civil rights. 6 months after the airport incident, Kevin Morrison stood in a federal courtroom in Washington, D.C. He'd pleaded guilty to a reduced charge in exchange for avoiding prison time. Instead, he was sentenced to 2 years of probation, 500 hours of community service, and a $10,000 fine. But the real punishment was the loss of his career, his reputation, and his sense of power. As he left the courtroom, a reporter shouted, "Mr. Morrison, do you have anything to say to General Washington?" Kevin stopped, looking at the cameras. For a moment, he seemed like he might walk away, but then he spoke. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I was wrong. I let my biases control my actions, and I hurt people. I can't undo that, but I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be better." It wasn't much, but it was something. Marcus watched the news coverage from his daughter's living room. Stephanie sat beside him, her hand on his shoulder. "Do you think he means it?" she asked. Marcus shrugged. "I don't know, maybe. But it doesn't matter. What matters is that the system changes. One apology doesn't fix 47 complaints." "But it's a start," Stephanie said. "Maybe," Marcus agreed. His phone buzzed. It was a text from General Linda Hayes. "Have you seen the news? Morrison sentenced. TSA reforms implemented. You did this, Marcus. You changed things." Marcus typed back, "We changed things, but there's still work to do." Linda replied, "Always is, but today we won. Take the win, General." Marcus smiled, setting his phone down. He looked out the window at his grandsons playing in the yard, their laughter carrying through the glass. Maybe Linda was right. Maybe today was a day to celebrate a small victory. Tomorrow, he'd get back to work. Marcus stood at the entrance to Reagan National Airport, looking up at the building where 1 year ago he'd been humiliated and harassed. But today was different. Today, there was a ceremony. The TSA had renamed the military screening lane at Reagan National in his honor. It was now called the General Marcus Washington Military Courtesy Lane, a dedicated screening area for active duty service members, veterans, and military families. Secretary Kellerman was there, along with General Hayes, the TSA administrator, and a crowd of reporters and veterans. "General Washington," Secretary Kellerman said, shaking Marcus's hand, "this lane represents a commitment, a promise that military members will be treated with the respect they deserve. And it exists because you had the courage to speak up." Marcus looked at the sign bearing his name, then at the veterans waiting in line to use the new lane. They were being greeted by TSA agents who thanked them for their service, who expedited their screening, who treated them with dignity. It was a small change, but it was real. "Thank you," Marcus said simply. As the ceremony ended, a young black airman approached Marcus. He couldn't have been more than 22, still in his uniform, his eyes wide with admiration. "General Washington, sir, I just wanted to say thank you. I flew through here last month and the agent saw my military ID and thanked me for my service. He didn't pull me out of line. He didn't treat me like a criminal, and it's because of you." Marcus put a hand on the young airman's shoulder. "It's not because of me. It's because people like you deserve to be treated with respect. Don't ever forget that." The airman saluted. Marcus returned it, and as he walked out of the airport, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: pride. Before we finish, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been racially profiled at an airport or anywhere else? How did it make you feel? Drop your story in the comments below. Let's start a conversation about this. And if this story hit home for you, if it made you think about respect and accountability, here's what I need you to do. 1. Hit that like button right now. Seriously, it takes 1 second and it helps more people see this story. 2. Subscribe to the Obsidian Files channel if you haven't already. We post powerful justice stories like this every single week. Stories about karma, accountability, and people getting exactly what they deserve. 3. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss an upload. 4. Share this video with someone who needs to see it. Share it with a veteran. Share it with someone who's experienced discrimination. Share it with someone who thinks racism isn't real anymore. Because these stories matter, these conversations matter, and change starts when we refuse to stay silent. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.